graduate students in organizational leadership and human services. He has helped these folks become better equipped in areas of communication, ethics, decision-making, organizational behavior, organizational change, and self-development. Mitchell has helped them reach their dreams in their organizations, whether it's nonprofit or for-profit, by providing insight for staff at all levels. Now let's welcome Mitchell.
Good morning. This is a good group. Sometimes when you go and speak places, you try to get a sense of what the group is like. And I have a good feel. On my way into the building, I got a chance to meet several of you. One person that I got an opportunity to meet is a man by the name of Kid. How many of you know Kid? If your applause for Kit is better than mine, so let's practice. How will you clap for me at the end? Oh no, that's too close to Kit. But Kit didn't know me before this morning. And as I walked up, Kit and Jimmy and a few other people were out there. And Kit just looked at me and says, "You look familiar." How many times have you heard somebody say that about you or someone else? Well, that's significant, because I wouldn't tell him who I was. I wanted him to think about it, and of course Jimmy recognized me from someplace else. So often in life we see people that remind us in one way or another of something that we can connect to. There are a few other people that I can recall their names, and we don't need that just yet. There are a few other people whose names that I recall meeting this morning. I don't remember everybody, but let me tell you about somebody else. How many of you know Pam Weber? How many of you know I was Pam's husband, Craig? When she saw me this morning, she said, "Craig." And eventually I found out in some additional conversation that her husband's name is Craig. How many of you know Lisa? Now, Lisa did not know that Pam looked at me minutes earlier and thought I was somebody named Craig. And so when I met Lisa, Lisa said, have you worked for, and she named a major medical provider in Pittsburgh, and she says, "Are you Craig?" Now, let's see. Now, I hope this Craig person is somebody that is good looking. Now, Nora Lynn, everybody knows Nora Lynn? We're going to get it. Nora Lynn knows my name. Matter of fact, she knows some things about me that many of you don't know. And hopefully you'll hear it toward the end of the presentation. But for some reason, Nora Lynn called me Tom. Do I look like a Tom? I look like Craig. There are so many things that we can connect to with other people. But if you've ever watched television, perhaps you've seen me on a program on television. Maybe you've seen me as a particular person on this program. That's it. Does that not look like me? Hey, if people are going to say you look familiar, do you not see a striking resemblance? Or that doesn't get you. I mean, after all, what about Before he got into movies, he was doing music. But how many of you knew that Will Smith was accepted on an academic scholarship to one of the best universities in America, MIT? How many of you knew that? Not just on, something else because he was a minority, but because of his academic ability. So there are things that we don't know about some people, and I would think that there are some things that, even though I got a chance to meet some of you today, there's some things I probably don't know about some of you. When we begin to think about life, there are certain things. Because Will Smith, many of us know, even if we can't do his dance anymore, many of us know movies. Can you think of some of the movies that Will Smith has been in? What is that? Somebody said 7 pounds. What else? Men in Black. I Am Legend.
Bad Boy.
What is that? Hit. Pursuit of Happiness. I, Robot. Independence Day. So we know Will from a lot of different, The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. How many of you have heard of Will Smith at least? Okay. We want to make sure we're on the same page. Right off the bat, one of you mentioned one of his movies that I want to talk about. How many of you have seen the movie 7 Pounds? But not everybody. I talked to Norlene a few moments ago, and she said, that's one of the movies that I want to see. So some of you will probably want to help me. When you think about the movie 7 Pounds, there were some significant things that Will Smith did in the movie. As he was in that particular movie, here's a person, or portrayed a person by the name of Tim Thomas. At least we got the Tom in there somewhere. As he represented Tim Thomas, he did it in a variety of ways. I'm going to make my way through this rather quickly because I want to talk about this in such a way that I think we'll all be able to connect. There were 7 ways that Will Smith winds up changing people's lives in that movie. 7 ways. In each of those ways, especially those of you who saw the movie, Will had to give a piece of himself. How many of you remember? What were some of the things that Will did? What were some of the pieces that he did? What? He gave up his house. He gave up his house.
His eyes.
He gave his eyes. He gave his heart. What is that?
Bone marrow.
He broke wrong marrow. That's how many? 4? What were the other things that Will Smith did? Well, let's look at them just for a moment. Because I think it will cause us to be able to connect in one way or another, because community life is about giving life to somebody else. Every day that you go to work, you're giving a piece of yourself. Maybe not on the same scale as Will Smith did with 7 Pounds. But one way or another, you're giving a part of yourself. He donated a lung lobe. He donated part of his liver. Remember the caseworker, the older caseworker who needed part of the liver? He donated his kidney to a junior hockey coach. He also did some other things. When you begin to think about it, he gave the keys, you said it, the keys and deed to his house. Those of you who watched that movie, first the woman that he was trying to give it to didn't want to receive it. She was reluctant. How many times in life we try to give something to somebody and at first they're reluctant? But those of you who recall the movie will recall that this woman was in dire need of getting out of her situation. She had an abusive husband, she had 2 children, and the first response she had to Will, as Tim Thomas, was, no, and she didn't believe it was real. But ultimately she came to a place in her life where she realized, I need to get out of this situation. She called him because he was pretending like he was his brother who worked for the Internal Revenue Service. She called him and he says basically to her, listen, no questions, all you need to do is sign your name on this deed and the house is yours. If you remember the house, it wound up being a beachfront, ocean-front house. When she and her children went into that house, one, they escaped from an abusive relationship. And 2, she got a house that she never had to pay anything for. There are other things that Will did. When you think about how someone said he donated some bone marrow, it was to a young boy named Nicholas. But that's not the end of what Will did. The movie was very strategic at a certain point, because no one of us can give all of ourselves at one time. But there are different times in life where certain things are required of us. So as we think about Will, we think about then some other things that he winds up doing. He winds up, remember Woody Harrelson? Yeah. Woody Harrelson was the one, someone over here said he gave up his eyes. What he wound up doing was giving up his cornea. But he didn't do that until toward the end of the movie. Woody Harrelson was a pianist. He also worked as a blind meat salesman. He gives him a gift that only somebody can give, most often at the end of life. But then somebody mentioned another situation. He gives his heart. If you recall the movie, it seemed like Will knew that that was going to be the end of him. Now, I'm not suggesting that anybody do what Will did in the end of the movie. But Will loved life so much that he knew it was important to help somebody else have a better life. Isn't that what community life is about? Yeah. Let me ask that question again. Isn't that what community life is about? Every day when you go to work, you give the heart that matters. Now, we know the person in the movie was Rosario Dawson. She portrayed a person named Emily. They seemingly fell in love with each other toward the end of the movie. She was a self-employed person who was a greeting card printer. Remember, he fixed her machine. She couldn't believe that he did it. What was his background in the movie? Do you remember? What did he do? He was an aeronautical engineer. See, there are skills. When you look at people, sometimes we don't know what abilities. I heard certain things about Kip this morning that I would never have known. Certain abilities, he started in one place in this organization, and then there are other things that he does. Every one of you, God has given to every one of you certain abilities. But in the movie, Will knew that one of the ultimate gifts that he was going to give as Tim Thomas was he had to give his heart. Why? Because Rosario Dawson, as Emily, had a rare blood type, and she had a coronary problem. So often again, we give our hearts. That's what makes life significant for somebody else. You give your heart. Every day you go to work. You may not think of it this way, but every day somebody is counting on you to add value to the kind of life that they live. Another way, again, you do it is every day you do what you do. Every day for community life, you help other people. Give yourselves a hand. People don't always do certain things. So I want to talk about some of those things for a moment. You don't need to jot any of these down unless you want to. But there was another movie that caught my attention just a few years ago, approximately a year and a half, almost 2 years ago. There was a movie with two persons that I'm certain most of you have heard of before. One was Jack Nicholson. I think the first movie, and this may date me a little bit, I think the first movie I ever saw with Jack Nicholson in it some years ago was, no, not The Shining, before The Shining. Oh, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Now, I'm not going to ask you how many people you know that are cuckoo and eat the nest. But that was the first time I remember seeing Jack Nicholson. The other significant actors in that movie, the bucket list was Morgan Freeman. And if you recall what happens in the movie, you'll recall that Morgan Freeman had worked hard all of his life, had given of himself, made sure his wife was a nurse, he made sure his children were educated. But then he meets this man, Jack Nicholson, portraying someone else in the movie, when both of them were diagnosed with terminal cancer. What an odd couple. How many of you saw that movie, The Bucket List? Now I found this. I asked young people after I saw the movie, because my wife and I happened to be in Florida when we saw the movie. We were on vacation that January. And as we said, well, we usually go and catch up on a few while we're away, stuff that we don't always have a chance to do here in the Pittsburgh area. And I came back and I asked young people, oh, are you going to go and see the bucket list? They looked at me like, no. That's an old people movie. I asked a few people this week, I said, have you seen the bucket list? One young man, he's probably about 15 years or so younger than me, he looked at me like, no. I said, I don't understand it. Those of you who saw the bucket list will recall the plot in it. The idea that you don't want to be at the end of life saying, oh, I wish I had done this, or I wish I had done that. Now, I'm not asking anyone here today to give away any part of your lung, no part of your kidney, no liver. I'm not asking for any bone marrow transplants today, because I'm not that kind of a doctor. But I am going to ask you to think about, regardless of what age you are, your own bucket list. What is it that you really want to do at some point in your life? You may not give a lot of thought to it now. See, I live in a world where people have dreams. And in my world, so often, I see a lot of people whose dreams are unfulfilled. I see things that they wish they had accomplished. I see people who may have at one point wanted to be successful, but maybe didn't understand how do you define success? Because success is not always the way some people define it. I know people who are professional athletes and other people in other significant roles, and how some of them value things is different than maybe you or I would do. I'm just like you. You may not think so, but in just when I share just a part of who I am, I hope you'll connect with me. No, I'm not Will Smith, to some of you are this minute. To some others of you, I'm not Craig. And I'm not Tom. But you and I'll be able to connect on some points that you may not think so. When you think about the bucket list, success means one thing to one person, and it means another thing to somebody else. I've met people that it's all about money. Well, not in my life, it's not all about money. And a few people here know me, know a few things about me because they're from my area. It may look like it's about money, but it's not about money. Somewhere at the core of what you do every day, somewhere at the core of what you are about as a person, are certain values that you have that resonate far beyond money. Nora Lynn knows this, as I've shared with her graduate school class before. I'm not driven by money. One of the things that drives me, folks, is one of the same things that I believe drives every one of you in this room. And it's all about helping somebody. So what do we do? How do we approach it? There can be a ladder of success so oftentimes that people try to climb to get as far up the rungs of the ladder as they can. It has been said, the ladder of success is best climbed by stepping on the rungs of opportunity. One of the things that I do in life is try to get people to realize where the opportunities are. Now, why is that so important to me? Because in my own life, I can look back and see where opportunities were taken away from me, they were denied, or there were times where I didn't see that there were possibilities. Most of you don't know me, and again, I guarantee you that even the people from my area that are here, there are certain things that they don't know about my background. I shared with one young lady during the break that I'm a professor. She didn't know that. She said, I didn't know that. But see, my road to getting there was not an easy road. And that's part of what I want to talk to you about. It was not the best road. I went to public school like most of you here. Some of you may have gone to Catholic school or some other school. But it's a difficult road for me. And somewhere along the way, I had to determine what it meant to try to reach some level of success. How do I overcome the barriers of my life? And if your life is anything like mine, there are some times when you didn't get anybody encouraging you to do something or to somehow, as we say, think outside. Come on, with that. Think outside the box. There's a man who basically says this. His name is Kevin Geary. Kevin says that there are 7 undeniable reasons why some people fail and other people succeed. Some of you can't see that, so let me say what they are. Number 1, he says, they define success wrong. Number 2, he says, they define opportunities wrong. Number 3, they define work wrong. Number 4, they defeat themselves. Number 5, they think failure is final. 6, they are a victim of their own circumstances. And then number 7, they take no for an answer. How many of you can connect on at least 1 or 2 of those things? Or you know somebody that somehow could have been successful. And let me take just a few moments to talk further about it. Because I can identify with what Kevin says here. I look successful today. I drove up in a certain kind of car today, which is my new one. Did you wonder about that when you saw the car? It's a car. And before I leave the area, I have to put gas in it. It's just a car. It's only, let me tell you something. In my years on the planet, I have gone from when my twin brother and I were college students. And there are lots of twins in my family. Some of you know some of the twins in my family. You do? How many of you recall a group called the Spinners? What about the song, Could It Be? Well, maybe I shouldn't sing. Could It Be a Falling in Love? My twin uncles wrote that. My mom's baby brothers. That was a family of 8. Well, one was a lyricist, and he taught English in a high school. He eventually became a school administrator. 30 years plus have gone by, and they are still making money from that song. But I remember when I went to college, let me backtrack just a little bit. I remember in high school and junior high school not doing very well. I remember especially junior high school, I was in special reading. Special reading. You know, those are the people that the other kids talk about. Ooh, y'all going to the dumb room. I remember failing one or more classes in high school. I remember when my father was working in the steel mill, that my mom and twin and I met before the high school counselor. And we overheard the high school counselor, and I recall his name to this day, telling our mom, they are not college material. And my mother was an educator. And she looked at Carl, wrote her last name, and she said, but my boys are going to college. Well, Carl was looking at our transcript. And the transcript didn't say college on it anywhere. But so often in life, people don't know the real potential that you have. When Mr. Carl said the second time, they are not college material, my mother was emphatic. She said, my boys are going to college. Now here's the strange thing. I applied to one college, and by some strike of luck, they accepted me. They accepted me on a probationary status. See, touch somebody next to you and say, all you need is a chance. only 17 years old. And I thought I was hanging in there pretty good when I didn't flunk out the first semester. Oh, come on, sir. Second semester went by. I still didn't flunk out. But by the third semester, I needed to go and visit my uncle, the lyricist, the English teacher, who lived about 45 minutes away from the campus. His twin lived in New Jersey. I visited my uncle. I believe it was on a Tuesday evening. You know, sometimes people can say things to you, they traumatize you. How many of you know some people who are just damaged for life? He did it accidentally. How many people you know are damaged for life on an accident? I remember walking up the steps into my uncle's bi-level home. And as we went into the living room, he said, "No, let's go into the dining room." And I'm going on with my uncle because I love my uncle. At least I did for a while. And as my uncle and I sat at the dining room table, he asked me a few questions. He said, and I had what I thought was a reasonably good paper, but something on the inside of me told me that somebody needed to look at this paper. And I let my uncle look at the paper. He said, "Well, what kind of grades do you get at college?" Because I guess he didn't want to help me too much. And I said, "Well, I'm a so-so student." He says, "Okay." And he looked at my paper, and he got out his red pen. Oh, God. I told you I've been traumatized. Norlin and other students of mine will tell you I never use red today.
You just use purple.
I will use purple or orange to correct something. When my uncle finished my paper, and I guess I didn't look at it that night when I got back to college, since I borrowed a friend's car to go and see my uncle. By the next day, I looked at the paper. There was more red on the paper than there was black. As I walked between Wise and Flu Cafeteria and North Hall, I started crying. And I made a promise to God. I said, "If you'll help me,
That's right.
I'll use it for you."
Amen.
When you're in trouble, you call whoever you think's going to answer. In my case, I came up in a Judeo-Christian home, so I understood I better call. See, I couldn't tell you the story about my first kidney stone. The first kidney stone I had, I was on the floor in the waiting room of the hospital outside the emergency room, and my wife looked at me late that night. She says, "I cannot believe my husband, who is so sophisticated, that doctor is on the floor." How many of you have ever had a kidney stone? I heard some say to me, "Call Buddha, call Papa." I was in pain. But in the case of paper, I never looked back after that. Some of you are listening to me right now, and there may have been some traumatic things that have happened in your life. You have to come to a point where you say, "I'm not going to look back anymore." We call that a turning point. I never let my mom, the educator, look at any of my papers. My twin always said, here's my paper, Mom," and she would help me write his paper. I remember saying to my mom when I first went to college, "If I get a D on this paper, it will be my D, and I'll know that when I'm a man, I can stand on my own 2 feet with my D." I never looked back after that moment. I never went back to my uncle again. He and I laugh about it today. He says, well, it helped you. I went on and graduated, ran into a little bump, grade-wise at some point, but I recovered from it. There are people in this room who have recovered from one thing or another. Maybe some of you have gone through some of the things that Will Smith talked about in his movie. We're a bunch of recoverers. I recovered to the bit. Somehow somebody invited me to a graduate school program at the University of Pittsburgh. I never asked them for it. Somehow somebody said, would you like to work on your master's degree in this? Somehow I got to the master's degree, working a full-time job and starting our church. So I really had 2 full-time jobs. By the time I finished the master's degree, I started working on a PhD at the University of Pittsburgh. I was in my 20s at the time. Remember, I was the guy who was in special reading in junior high school. Remember, I was the guy that my uncle put all that red stuff on my paper. But now I was the guy who was at the University of Pittsburgh doing doctoral studies at the age of 25. Working 2 full-time jobs, going to school 2 nights a week, and then a few years before I finished my doctorate, the babies started coming. Now, my wife quit her job, and I was like, you did what? She didn't quit your job. Don't take care of your kid. You wanted this kid. She rehearsed it in my hearing a few days ago. She said, well, I have these kids for you. It's the truth. She didn't want any kids. She was the youngest of 8. She had seen enough. So if you ever get a chance to see her, when you see her, she had the kids for me. You know what she tells me today? And you're still paying on what you owe me. I finished the degree by the time I was 30. I look back over the years and I thought, but there were people who gave bits and pieces of themselves to me. I can recall teachers, just a few here and there, even in public school, that somehow lit a fire in my life. Amen. I can remember in college having one particular professor for speech communication. And he looked at me and I delivered AV equipment around the campus, my twin and I. That's how we made some of our college money. And I can remember this one professor named Dr. Charlie Willard, Vietnam era, long, stringly hair, saying to me in the doorway to his office, what is your major? What kind of grades do you have? He said, how would you like to work on a doctor's degree? And he named the top 10 communication schools in the nation. He said, you would do well on the debate team. I'm like, God, I'm just trying to graduate from college. It's like, he doesn't understand. If I could just pass. I mean, you've had those moments. If I could just get over the hump moments. And if I could just see the daylight of tomorrow. Here's this guy talking about something that he saw in my potential. Never dealt with my uncle again, I told you, in terms of writing. But I finished my PhD before my uncle finished his. Some years later, he got his doctorate from the University of Pittsburgh, and we laugh and talk about it today. But I never looked back. Ultimately, TV stuff opened up for me to do TV, so I do all that kind of stuff now. My program is seen around the country. And I became a newspaper columnist in our area probably about 9.5 years ago. They just asked me to write something and they paid me to do it, so I do it. And I write anything I want to write. And I won an award doing that. Can you imagine the guy that my uncle put all that red on his paper is now an award-winning columnist? Potential. But when you look at these 7 things, again, some of us may have looked at success as one thing. For me, it was just trying to make it. Trying to somehow, there was a desire within me. I wanted to do certain things with my life. The graduate school students that I mentor at Geneva College, they have no tests or quizzes, everything writing. So here was the test. Here was a guy who struggled now learning how to write, helping other people learn how to write. My role is to give them a piece of what I have received in life. Sometimes when we look, number 2 again, we look at our opportunities wrong. I tell my grad school students this. I say, I may not be very smart. I tell them, I may not be very smart. Or let me help those of you who aren't convinced. When I finished the PhD, by the time I was 30, working 2 full-time jobs, having babies, our second child was just born over a weekend, approaching a weekend. We had no computers in those days, and my wife came home from the hospital, sat on a pillow with an electric typewriter, and I handed her, I kept the baby on my left shoulder, had my 3-year-old behind me on the couch. In 48 hours time, I slept 5 hours, but I wrote what came out to be 90 typewritten pages within 48 hours. And she keeps saying to me, you owe me. I tell people, my wife has always loved me, but during that time, she did not like me. How many ladies here have had a baby? Imagine coming home from the hospital the day that you had the baby and you're sitting on a pillow typing some dude's dissertation. One time she said to me because I was in the basement working on the stuff and bringing it upstairs to the kitchen where she was around the kitchen table, and she said to me at one point, she said, you think you can give me more than 1 page at a time to type? I said, I only got 1 page at a time. I'm writing it as I'm giving it to you. How do we look at opportunities? I tell students this. My gift is being resourceful. I'm gifted at finding the resources. When I heard the story earlier in one of the presentations about trying to get into Westmoreland County, we've already begun to make a contact, and hopefully we can set up a meeting with one of the key people in that particular city so that we can see if we can get into Westmoreland County with community life. Resources. I look at work differently than maybe some people. I start my day about 3 o'clock in the morning. It is not unusual for people to get emails from me 3 o'clock in the morning. Is that correct, ma'am? Now, every day is not that strange, but most days I don't use an alarm clock. So I figure when it's my time to wake up, the eyes come open and I wake up. The question that some of you have is, when did you go to bed? Whenever Last night it was probably about 11:30. And I was awake about 2:30 this morning. Oh my. I told you that number 3, they define work wrong. Now I'm not saying you have to do what I do. There are certain things on the inside of me that says, now that I have opportunity, let me work it. Let me take advantage of it, because see, in my life, just as I suggest you consider developing, regardless of your age, your own bucket list. What is it I would like to accomplish? So I got the degree out of the way, got back educated, they're making their own money, they got their own money. How many of you with grown kids? Isn't it wonderful if they have their own money? My daughters got married within 8 months of each other. Imagine having 2 girls get married, and now my wife said, okay, I'm done with her budget. Now we're going to work on the other budget. Just sign the check, she said. When we think about the things that have to be accomplished in life, opportunities, my bucket list was to get those things out of the way. But I told both of my sons-in-law on their wedding days, I said, some of you can borrow this, I don't mind, you don't have to give me credit. I said, from my pocket to yours. Thanks, Dad, for giving me your daughter. You have no idea. I love the idea because my daughter's tried it shortly after your marriage. Well, Dad, aren't you giving me something? I said, you got a husband. Are you not buying me no more? You got a husband. You got your own house. Opportunities. So one of the things that I do is try to point out opportunities. Sometimes we encounter people who defeat themselves. Most of us here have gone through certain things in life where we could have just quit, and some of you may have quit. Some of you in your present job think this is the end of what you will ever do. I'm here to say there's something else happening on the inside. Well, I'm at a certain age and I just can't do it. Let me tell you about a man named Bob Livingston. Most of you don't know Bob Livingston. Bob grew up in central Pennsylvania. Growing up in central Pennsylvania, he always wanted to go to college years ago, but the war happened, World War II. Bob had to leave the family plumbing business and go into the military. Bob, back in those days, wanted to become a medical doctor. The war ended, Bob came home, he got back involved in the family business. But somewhere on the inside of Bob Livingston was this desire, he wanted to become a doctor. In his late 70s, Bob went back to college through Geneva College's degree completion program. By the time he was 78, finished his bachelor's. Bob that I eventually met was Bob who then got accepted to the master's degree program, Feisty Bob. Bob never missed a day driving in from central Pennsylvania for class. And by the time Bob was 80 years old, Bob had finished his master's degree. His bucket list. Bob then decided, can I get into a doctoral program? At 80. Hello, somebody. Bob was accepted, as far as I recall, to the Indiana University of Pennsylvania doctoral program. And he decided at some point, you know, this is enough. So he didn't finish the doctor's degree. But Bob did not allow certain things to escape him. Why am I saying that to all of you? Don't defeat yourselves. I thought I had failed. If we had time, I will tell you some other things that happened in my life that had failure written all over it. I can talk to you about things that I should have quit a long time ago, before I got the education. But there was something that said, if somebody else can get it, I ought to be able to get it. Failure? I know failure. How many of you are Star Trek people? Remember when Captain Kirk, the first Captain Kirk, went through Star Space Academy? Remember that? And he changed the test. How many remember he changed the test? Now, I'm not telling you to change your test. But he changed the test. They said, how did you do this? No one has ever passed the test. He said, I changed the rules. In my life, I learned how to change the rules so that I could succeed. And that's what I do for other people. I teach them how to look at the rules, not bending, not breaking, but change them so as to allow them to help them fulfill their dream in life. So failure is no longer final. Failure for me is another option to start fresh. That's how I see failure. Sometimes you are victims of your own circumstances, sometimes more than that. One of the things I've learned in life is I will not take no for an answer. But I figured if somebody else could do something, then it's possible. Everybody say it's possible. And I would look at somebody across the table, just point at them and say, if you can do it, I can do it. But I remember when I was writing my doctoral dissertation, which is the book that I have to do at the very end of all of my studies. And I had a professor on my committee who said, I want you to include in your data something on psycholinguistics. I had absolutely no idea what psycholinguistics was at that time. But I had to do what she said. And I found out as I began to research psycholinguistics that there are certain things that in our early stages in life, especially when we're between 2 and 5 years old, that begin to be said. And if you think back in your life, and some of you who have children, grandchildren, when they're 2 and 5, they somehow develop this thing about no. It seems like many kids say no before they say yes. No. And you have to work with that. Well, if you're going to accomplish the dream that you had within you, you have to deal with the no's and say, no, I'm going to do this. Let's practice that. Say, no, no, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. That's not the right answer. Yeah. Say, no, no, I'm going to get it done. You can do have some things that are in your bucket list. Things you want to do. If I can do it, if somebody else can do it, you do it. Don't take no for an answer. I mentioned Kevin Geary, but let me give you perhaps the last slide. If you look at my comment. Thomas Alva Edison said this. Many of life's failures are people who did not realize how close they were to success when they gave up. Think about the people you know that have drowned. If they had just done it just a little bit more sugar, just a little bit more. Somebody taught me a long time ago that the difference between an A grade and a B grade is just a little more effort. Once I understood that, I started putting in more effort. Anything you want to do in life, you are almost there. You just need to put just additional effort. Anything you want to accomplish in life, folks, my attitude, and I teach it this way. If I can do it, anybody can do it. Regardless of your age again, develop your bucket list. If you're in your 20s, write your list now. Before I die, this is what I want to accomplish. If you're in your 30s, your 40s, your 50s, your 90s, develop your list. I may have accomplished a lot of things, but all it's me is that I still have a lot more potential to do a lot of other things. I'm not done yet. You know one of my greatest believers beyond my children? My wife is a believer in it. If you don't have somebody around you, get somebody around you who believes that you can do it. My wife believes that anything I set my mind to, because she has seen my failures in life. But she believes now, if he sets his mind to it, he can do it. I surround myself with people that are positive. That's what I do. So I end on this note. People think I have a lot of friends. I know a lot of people. Because of the television program being around the country, and sometimes in our community, because of the newspaper cover, with my picture in it, people walk up to me in grocery stores, in department stores, in restaurants, and tell me about my cause. I could be in another city around the country, and somebody walks up to me and says, I just saw you on TV in my city. I know a lot of people, but my giftedness is resourcefulness. Am I smart? Remember, I was working 2 full-time jobs and having babies when I was in my doctor's degree. Yeah, I was having babies. Because I got big. How many full-time jobs? 2. How many babies at that point? 2. My grade point average coming out of the doctoral program at the University of Pittsburgh was a 3.7. I know a lot of people, but I only have 5 friends. And I got them on a rotating basis. The only person that doesn't rotate off is my wife. Because I haven't removed her name from a lot of my important documents, like my checkbook. Enjoy life. You add life to other people.
All right.
Never get tired of giving them a piece of your liver, theoretically, a piece of your lung. Never get tired of giving them that bone marrow. Never get tired, above all things, of giving the people that you deal with on a day-to-day basis a piece of your heart. And you